My name is Ruthie Foster, and I'm 71 years old. Last Tuesday afternoon, I discovered that my son Curtis had stolen my pension card, the card I use to receive my monthly Social Security payment, the only money I have to live on. The card that means the difference between eating or going hungry, between paying my electric bill or sitting in the dark. When I realized what Curtis had done, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't call him to beg for it back like he probably expected. Instead, that night, I made 3 phone calls that would take away something Curtis valued far more than my pension card: his freedom. By morning, Curtis was in handcuffs. By afternoon, he was in jail. And by the end of the week, he'd lost his job, his apartment, and any chance of avoiding prison time. My son stole my pension card. That night, I took his freedom, and I don't regret it for a single second. But to understand how a mother could do this to her own son, you need to understand the whole story. You need to know about the 30 years of theft and lies that led to this moment. You need to know what Curtis had been doing to me and what I finally decided to do about it. I live on a fixed income. Every month, my Social Security payment gets deposited onto my pension card, a prepaid debit card the government issues to people like me who don't have bank accounts. The amount isn't much, just $1,247 a month, but it's all I have. That money pays for everything. My rent, $650, my utilities, $120, my groceries, $200, my medications, $180, and whatever's left goes to other necessities like phone bills, transportation, and emergencies. I budget carefully. I have to. There's no extra money. There's no savings account. There's no backup plan. If something happens to that pension card, I don't eat. It's that simple. So I keep the card in my wallet, which I keep in my purse, which I keep with me at all times. I never leave it lying around. I never let it out of my sight. Except last Tuesday, I made a mistake. Curtis came to visit me Tuesday morning. He does this sometimes, shows up unannounced, stays for an hour or two, then leaves. He always has a reason. He wants to check on me. He was in the neighborhood. He missed me. But I know the real reason Curtis visits. He's checking to see if I have anything he can take. Curtis is 43 years old, and he's been stealing from me since he was a teenager. It started small, money from my wallet, food from my refrigerator, items from my house that he could pawn. Over the years, it got worse. He stole my late husband's watch. He stole jewelry my mother left me. He stole checks from my checkbook and forged my signature. Every time I caught him, Curtis would apologize and promise it would never happen again. And like a fool, I believed him, because he was my son, because I loved him, because I kept hoping he'd change. But Curtis never changed. He just got better at stealing. That Tuesday morning, Curtis showed up around 10 o'clock. "Hey, Mom," he said with that charming smile he's had since he was a little boy. "Just wanted to check on you. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine, Curtis," I said cautiously. I'd learned to be careful around my son, even though it broke my heart. "Can I come in?" Curtis asked. "I brought coffee." He held up 2 cups from the coffee shop down the street. I hesitated. I didn't really want Curtis in my apartment. I'd hidden everything valuable long ago, but refusing would just make him angry and suspicious. "Okay," I said, opening the door wider. Curtis came in and sat on my couch. We talked about nothing: the weather, his job. He claimed to be working as a warehouse supervisor, though I suspected he'd been fired weeks ago, my health. Normal small talk between a mother and son. After about 20 minutes, I excused myself to use the bathroom. "I'll be right back," I said. That was my mistake. When I came back 3 minutes later, Curtis was still sitting on the couch, looking at his phone. "I should probably get going," he said, standing up. "Got some errands to run." "Okay," I said. "Thanks for stopping by." Curtis hugged me goodbye, something that should have made me happy but instead made me tense, because hugs from Curtis usually meant he'd just stolen something and left. I locked the door behind him and immediately started checking. My TV was still there. The few pieces of jewelry I had left were still in my bedroom. The small amount of cash I kept hidden, $40 for emergencies, was still in its hiding spot. Everything seemed fine. It wasn't until later that afternoon that I realized what Curtis had taken. I needed to go to the grocery store. My refrigerator was almost empty, and I had to buy food for the rest of the week. I grabbed my purse and pulled out my wallet to check how much money was on my pension card before I left. The card wasn't there. At first, I thought I'd just put it in a different pocket of my wallet. I checked every slot, every compartment. Nothing. Then I dumped out my entire purse on the kitchen table. I went through everything: receipts, tissues, coins, keys, my phone. No pension card. My heart started racing. Where was it? I'd had it 2 days ago when I went to the pharmacy. I remembered specifically using it to pay for my medications, and I always put it back in the same slot in my wallet. Unless Curtis had taken it. I thought back to this morning. Curtis had been alone in my living room for 3 minutes while I was in the bathroom. My purse had been sitting on the table next to the couch where he was sitting. 3 minutes. That's all the time Curtis would have needed to go through my purse, find my wallet, take the pension card, and put everything back. I felt sick. My pension card, the only way I could access my money, and Curtis had stolen it. I immediately called Curtis's phone. It rang 5 times, then went to voicemail. "Curtis, it's Mom. Call me back right away. It's important." I waited 30 minutes. No call back. I called again. This time Curtis answered. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" "Curtis, my pension card is missing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you see it when you were here this morning?" "Your pension card," Curtis repeated. "No, I didn't see it. Are you sure it's missing? Maybe you just misplaced it." "I didn't misplace it," I said firmly. "Curtis, I need you to be honest with me. Did you take my pension card?" "What?" Curtis said, his voice rising with fake indignation. "Are you seriously accusing me of stealing from you? Mom, I came over to check on you because I care about you, and this is how you treat me." "Curtis, please," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm not trying to accuse you. I just need my pension card back. That's how I get my money. If I don't have it, I can't buy food. I can't pay my bills." "Well, I don't have it," Curtis said coldly. "Maybe you left it somewhere and forgot. You're getting older, Mom. Maybe your memory isn't as good as it used to be." That was Curtis's favorite tactic, making me doubt myself, suggesting I was confused or forgetful because of my age. "My memory is fine," I said. "Curtis, if you have my card, please just give it back. I won't be angry, I just need it back." "I don't have your stupid card," Curtis snapped. "And I'm getting really tired of you constantly accusing me of stealing. Maybe I should stop visiting you altogether if this is how you're going to treat me." "Curtis," I started, but he'd already hung up. I sat there holding my phone, feeling tears form in my eyes. Curtis had stolen my pension card. I knew it. And he was lying about it, gaslighting me, trying to make me think I was confused. But I wasn't confused. I knew exactly what had happened. I tried to think clearly through my panic. My pension card was gone. Curtis had it. Without that card, I couldn't access my Social Security money. My rent was due in 10 days. I had $22 in cash and maybe $15 worth of food in my apartment. I had no other source of income. I called the Social Security office. After being on hold for 45 minutes, I finally reached a representative. "My pension card was stolen," I explained. "I need a replacement card." "Okay, ma'am," the representative said. "I can order you a replacement card. It should arrive in 7 to 10 business days." 7 to 10 days, I repeated, my voice rising. "I need my money now. My rent is due next week. I need to buy food." "I understand, ma'am, but that's how long it takes for a replacement card to be mailed," the representative said. "However, we can cancel your current card immediately so whoever has it can't use it." "Okay, please cancel it," I said. At least Curtis wouldn't be able to drain my account. "Done," the representative said after a few moments. "Your old card is now deactivated. No one can use it. Your new card will arrive in 7 to 10 business days. I hung up feeling slightly relieved. Curtis couldn't use the stolen card, but I also couldn't access my money for a week or more. I called Curtis again. This time, he didn't answer. I left a voicemail. "Curtis, I just canceled the pension card, so you can't use it. Please just return it to me. I need to go to the Social Security office with it to prove it was stolen so they can send me a replacement faster. Please, Curtis, I'm your mother. Don't do this to me." Curtis never called back. That evening, I did something I probably should have done years ago. I called my friend Opal, who lives in the same apartment building as Curtis. "Opal, it's Ruthie," I said. "I need to ask you something. Have you seen Curtis today?" "Actually, yes," Opal said. "I saw him this afternoon at the liquor store down the street from his apartment. He was buying a bunch of beer and cigarettes. Looked like he was having a party or something." My heart sank. Curtis didn't have a job. He'd been complaining for weeks that he was broke and couldn't afford his rent. Yet suddenly, the same day my pension card disappeared, he had money to buy alcohol and cigarettes. "Did he say anything to you?" I asked. "Not really," Opal said. "He seemed like he was in a good mood, though. Told the cashier to keep the change from $100 bill." $100 bill. My monthly Social Security deposit had gone into my pension card account yesterday, Monday. Before I'd canceled the card today, Curtis could have used it to withdraw cash from an ATM. He'd stolen my pension card, withdrawn my money, and was now spending it on beer and cigarettes while I sat at home with $22 to my name and no way to buy groceries. I thanked Opal and hung up. Then I sat at my kitchen table and thought about what to do next. For 30 years, Curtis had been stealing from me. For 30 years, I'd made excuses for him, bailaid him out, protected him from consequences. I'd told myself he was my son, that he'd change eventually, that I had to keep giving him chances. But I was 71 years old. I lived on $1,247 a month. Curtis had stolen the card I needed to access that money, and he was spending my money on alcohol while I worried about how I'd eat next week. I was done protecting Curtis. I was done making excuses. I was done being a victim. That night, I made a decision. Curtis had stolen from me for the last time, and this time, he was going to face real consequences. At 8 o'clock that night, I made the first of 3 phone calls that would change everything. Call 1, the police. I called the non-emergency police number. "I'd like to report a theft," I told the dispatcher. "What was stolen?" the dispatcher asked. "My pension card, my Social Security debit card," I said. "My son took it from my purse this morning when he was visiting me, and I have evidence he used it to withdraw money from my account." "Hold on, ma'am," the dispatcher said. "Let me connect you to an officer who can take your report." A few minutes later, I was speaking with Officer Raymond Thompson. I told him the whole story. Curtis visiting that morning, my pension card disappearing, Curtis lying when I asked about it, Opal seeing him spending money he didn't have. "Do you have proof your son took the card?" Officer Thompson asked. "He was the only person in my apartment today," I said. "The card was in my purse. He was alone with my purse for about 3 minutes while I was in the bathroom. When he left, the card was gone." "That's circumstantial," Officer Thompson said. "But the fact that he was seen spending money shortly after your card went missing is suspicious. Do you know if he used the card to make any purchases or withdrawals?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But my friend saw him at the liquor store with a lot of cash, and he told the cashier to keep the change from $100 bill. Officer, my son doesn't have a job. He's been broke for weeks. Where would he suddenly get $100 bill?" "Good point," Officer Thompson said. "Mrs. Foster, I'm going to open a case. Can you contact your Social Security office tomorrow and get transaction records for your card? If your son used it, there will be a record of when and where." "I'll do that first thing in the morning," I promised. "In the meantime, I'm going to pay your son a visit tonight," Officer Thompson said. "Just to ask him some questions. What's his address?" I gave him Curtis's address. After I hung up, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. Finally, Curtis was going to face a police officer asking him questions about his theft. But I wasn't done. Call 2, Curtis's landlord. Curtis rented a small apartment from a landlord named Geneva Martinez. I'd met Geneva a few times over the years when I'd helped Curtis with rent payments, which I now realized had been a mistake. I called Geneva. "Hi, Geneva, this is Ruthie Foster, Curtis Foster's mother." "Oh, hello, Ruthie," Geneva said. "Is everything okay?" "Not really," I said. "Geneva, I need to tell you something. Curtis stole my pension card today, the card I used to get my Social Security money. I've filed a police report. The police are going to his apartment tonight to question him." "Oh my goodness," Geneva said. "I'm so sorry, Ruthie, that's terrible." "There's something else you should know," I continued. "Curtis told me 2 weeks ago that he couldn't pay this month's rent because he'd lost his job. He asked me for money to help with rent. I told him I couldn't afford it. But today, hours after stealing my pension card, he was seen buying alcohol and cigarettes with cash." "So he lied about not having money," Geneva said slowly. "Yes," I confirmed. "And Geneva, I need to ask you, has Curtis paid rent for this month?" "No," Geneva admitted. "He's 3 days late. He told me he'd have it by Friday." "He won't," I said, "because he doesn't have a job, and the money he stole from me is going to be spent on alcohol and cigarettes, not rent. Geneva, I'm telling you this because you've been patient with Curtis, and I don't want him to take advantage of you the way he's taken advantage of me. If Curtis hasn't paid rent, you should start the eviction process." "I appreciate you telling me this," Geneva said. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Ruthie. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know." After I hung up, I felt another small sense of satisfaction. Curtis was about to lose his apartment. But I still wasn't done. Call 3, Curtis's boss. Curtis had told me he worked as a warehouse supervisor at a shipping company. He'd been working there for 6 months, or at least, that's what he'd told me. I'd met his boss, Theodore Mitchell, once when I dropped Curtis off at work after his car broke down. Theodore had seemed like a nice man, professional, no nonsense, the kind of boss who'd want to know if one of his employees was a thief. I called the shipping company. "Hi, I'm trying to reach Theodore Mitchell," I told the receptionist. "Mr. Mitchell has left for the day," the receptionist said. "Can I take a message?" "Yes," I said. "Please tell him that Ruthie Foster called about Curtis Foster. It's urgent. Curtis's mother." I left my phone number and hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Theodore. "Mrs. Foster, this is Theodore Mitchell," he said. "I got your message. Is Curtis okay?" "Physically, yes," I said. "But Theodore, I need to tell you something important. Today, Curtis stole my Social Security pension card from my purse. I filed a police report. The police are at his apartment right now questioning him." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Theodore said quietly, "Curtis is no longer employed here, Mrs. Foster. I fired him 3 weeks ago." My heart sank even though I wasn't entirely surprised. "Why?" I asked. "He was caught stealing from the warehouse," Theodore said. "Small items at first, supplies, tools. Then we discovered he'd been taking inventory and selling it online. When we confronted him, he denied everything even though we had him on security cameras. I fired him and told him if he returned the stolen items, I wouldn't press charges. He never did." "So Curtis has been lying to me for 3 weeks," I said. "He told me he still had his job." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Foster," Theodore said. "I probably should have called you, but Curtis is an adult. I assumed he'd tell you himself." "Curtis doesn't tell me anything unless it's a lie," I said bitterly. "Theodore, the reason I'm calling is because I wanted you to know what kind of person Curtis is. If he ever tries to come back and work for you, or if another employer calls you for a reference, I want you to tell them the truth." "I will," Theodore promised. "And Mrs. Foster, I'm sorry about your pension card. I hope you get it back." After I hung up with Theodore, I sat back in my chair. 3 phone calls. 3 consequences starting to unfold for Curtis. The police were questioning him about the theft. His landlord knew he'd lied about not having rent money and was probably going to evict him. And his former boss had confirmed Curtis was a thief who'd been fired weeks ago. Curtis had stolen my pension card that morning. By that night, I'd begun taking his freedom. But the real reckoning was still to come. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Did Ruthie do the right thing? What should happen to Curtis? Where are you watching from? 20 minutes after I hung up with Theodore, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Officer Raymond Thompson standing in the hallway. I opened the door. Officer Thompson. Mrs. Foster, I just came from your son's apartment, Officer Thompson said. May I come in? Of course, I said, stepping aside to let him in. Officer Thompson sat down at my kitchen table. He pulled out a notebook. I need to ask you some questions about what happened today. Then I need to tell you what I found at your son's apartment. Okay, I said, sitting across from him. You said your pension card disappeared this morning after your son visited, Officer Thompson began. Can you walk me through exactly what happened? I told him everything. Curtis arriving at 10 o'clock, us sitting on the couch talking, me going to the bathroom for about 3 minutes, Curtis being alone with my purse during that time, Curtis leaving shortly after, me discovering later that afternoon that my pension card was missing. And you're certain the card was in your wallet before your son's visit? Officer Thompson asked. Yes, I said. I used it 2 days ago at the pharmacy. I always put it back in the same slot in my wallet. I'm very careful with it because it's the only way I can access my money. Did you give your son permission to take the card? Officer Thompson asked. No, I said firmly. I would never give him permission to take it. Has your son stolen from you before? Officer Thompson asked. I hesitated. This was the question I'd been dreading, because if I said yes, I'd have to admit that I'd been enabling Curtis's theft for decades, that I'd known he was a thief and had done nothing about it. But I also knew that if I lied to protect Curtis now, he'd never face consequences, and I was done protecting him. Yes, I said quietly. Curtis has been stealing from me since he was a teenager. Money, jewelry, items from my house. He stole checks from my checkbook and forged my signature. He's stolen thousands of dollars from me over the years. And you never reported it? Officer Thompson asked, though his tone wasn't judgmental, just factual. No, I admitted. I always made excuses for him. He's my son. I kept hoping he'd change, but he never did. Why are you reporting it now? Officer Thompson asked. Because I'm 71 years old and living on $1,247 a month, I said, my voice breaking. That pension card is how I access my Social Security payment. Without it, I can't eat. I can't pay my bills. Curtis has stolen a lot from me over the years, but this time he stole something I can't live without, and I'm done making excuses for him. Officer Thompson nodded. I understand. Mrs. Foster, I went to your son's apartment tonight. I asked him about your pension card. What did he say? I asked. He denied taking it, Officer Thompson said. He said you were confused and probably misplaced it. He suggested that maybe your memory isn't what it used to be because of your age. I felt anger rise in my chest. My memory is fine. Curtis is lying. I believe you, Officer Thompson said. And here's why. When I was at your son's apartment, I noticed several things. First, there were multiple cases of beer and several cartons of cigarettes on his kitchen counter, items that cost money. Second, your son's apartment was a mess, but I saw unopened bills scattered on his table, including a past due rent notice. Third, when I asked your son how he afforded the beer and cigarettes if he's unemployed, he got defensive and told me it was none of my business. So you think he used my pension card to buy those things? I asked. I think it's very likely, Officer Thompson said. But I need proof. Mrs. Foster, tomorrow I need you to call Social Security and get a transaction history for your pension card. If your son used it to withdraw money or make purchases before you canceled it, there will be a record. Bring that record to the police station, and we'll have enough evidence to arrest him. I'll do it first thing in the morning, I promised. There's something else, Officer Thompson said. When I was questioning your son, I ran his name through our system. Did you know your son has 2 prior arrests for theft? I felt like I'd been punched. What? No, when? 5 years ago, he was arrested for shoplifting, Officer Thompson said. The charges were dropped because the store owner didn't want to press charges. 3 years ago, he was arrested for stealing from his employer. That case also didn't go forward because he returned what he'd stolen, and his employer decided not to prosecute. I didn't know, I said, stunned. Curtis had been arrested twice for theft, and he'd never told me. Curtis never said anything to me about being arrested. Most people don't tell their families when they get arrested, Officer Thompson said. But Mrs. Foster, this is important. If your son is charged with stealing your pension card, this won't be his first offense. The prosecutor will see that he has a pattern of theft. That will affect how seriously they take this case. Good, I said firmly. Curtis needs to face real consequences this time. I've been protecting him for 30 years, and all it did was make him worse. I understand, Officer Thompson said. He stood up to leave. Get me those transaction records tomorrow, Mrs. Foster. Once I have them, I'll have enough evidence to make an arrest. After Officer Thompson left, I sat at my kitchen table feeling a mix of emotions. Guilt for turning in my own son. Relief that someone finally believed me. Anger that Curtis had been arrested twice before and never told me. But mostly, I felt determined. Tomorrow, I would get the proof Officer Thompson needed, and Curtis would finally face consequences. I called Social Security at 8 a.m. when their offices opened. After another long wait on hold, I reached a representative. I called yesterday to report my pension card stolen and have it canceled, I explained. I need transaction records for the card, specifically any withdrawals or purchases made yesterday before the card was canceled. I can pull that up for you, the representative said. Let me look at your account. There was silence while she looked at her computer. Then she said, Mrs. Foster, I see one transaction yesterday morning at 10:47 a.m. A cash withdrawal of $800 from an ATM at the First National Bank branch on Maple Street. My heart sank. $800. Curtis had withdrawn $800 from my account. That's more than half my monthly payment, I said, my voice shaking. I only get $1,247 a month, and Curtis took $800. I'm very sorry, Mrs. Foster, the representative said. The good news is that we canceled the card shortly after that withdrawal, so no additional money was taken. And since you reported the theft, we can investigate and possibly refund the stolen amount. How long will that take? I asked. Usually 4 to 6 weeks for the investigation, the representative said. 4 to 6 weeks. I had to survive for 4 to 6 weeks with only $447 left in my account, and that was assuming the investigation went in my favor. Can you send me a printed copy of the transaction record? I asked. The police need it as evidence. I can email it to you right now, the representative said. Do you have an email address? I gave her my email address. 2 minutes later, the transaction record arrived in my inbox. I printed it out at my neighbor's apartment. I didn't have a printer and looked at the paper. There it was in black and white. A cash withdrawal of $800 at 10:47 a.m. on Tuesday, October 15th, from the First National Bank ATM on Maple Street. I'd been in the bathroom at 10:45 a.m. when Curtis took my pension card from my purse. By 10:47 a.m., just 2 minutes after leaving my apartment, Curtis was at an ATM withdrawing my money. He'd planned this. He'd come to my apartment specifically to steal my pension card. He'd waited for me to go to the bathroom, taken the card, left my apartment, and gone straight to an ATM to withdraw as much cash as possible before I noticed it was missing. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was premeditated theft. I called Officer Thompson. I have the transaction records, I told him. Curtis withdrew $800 from my account at 10:47 yesterday morning, 2 minutes after he left my apartment. That's exactly the evidence we need, Officer Thompson said. Can you bring the records to the police station this morning? I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said. At the police station, Officer Thompson reviewed the transaction records I'd brought. This is perfect, he said. Your son withdrew the money at 10:47 a.m., which is consistent with your timeline of events. And the ATM location is only 3 blocks from your apartment. That's exactly where someone would go if they'd just stolen a card and wanted to withdraw cash quickly before it was canceled. So you can arrest him, I asked. Yes, Officer Thompson said. I'm going to get an arrest warrant right now. Mrs. Foster, I need to warn you. When we arrest your son, he's going to be angry. He's probably going to blame you. Are you prepared for that? Yes, I said, though my heart was pounding. I'm prepared. Good, Officer Thompson said. We'll probably make the arrest sometime this afternoon. I'll call you and let you know when it's done. I went home and waited. Every minute felt like an hour. I kept thinking about Curtis being arrested. My son, in handcuffs, being taken to jail. Part of me felt guilty. What kind of mother has her own son arrested? But then I thought about the $800 Curtis had stolen from me. Money I needed for food and rent and medicine. Money Curtis had spent on beer and cigarettes while I sat at home worried about how I'd survive the next month. Curtis had made his choice. Now he had to face the consequences. At 3 p.m., Officer Thompson called. Mrs. Foster, we've arrested your son. He's currently being processed and will be held in custody until his arraignment tomorrow morning. What did he say when you arrested him? I asked. He denied everything, Officer Thompson said. He claimed he didn't steal your card and didn't make the ATM withdrawal. But we have the evidence, the transaction record, the timeline, the fact that he was seen with cash shortly after the withdrawal. He'll be charged with theft of property valued at more than $750, which is a felony in this state. A felony, I repeated. Yes, Officer Thompson confirmed. Because he stole more than $750, this is grand theft, not petty theft. And because you're over 65 and he's a family member, there may be additional charges related to financial exploitation of an elderly person. I felt dizzy. My son was being charged with a felony. Curtis could go to prison. Mrs. Foster, are you okay? Officer Thompson asked. I'm okay, I said, though I wasn't sure if that was true. Thank you for calling me. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment. Curtis was in jail, because of me, because I'd finally stopped protecting him and told the police the truth. I waited for guilt to overwhelm me, but instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, relief. At 7 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID said County Jail. I almost didn't answer, but I knew it was Curtis, and I knew I had to face him eventually. I answered, Hello. This is a collect call from an inmate at County Jail, an automated voice said. To accept charges, press 1. I pressed 1. Mom, Curtis's voice came through and he sounded furious. Mom, what did you do? I reported you for stealing my pension card, I said calmly, and for withdrawing $800 from my account without my permission. I can't believe you called the cops on me, Curtis yelled. I'm your son. How could you do this to me? How could I do this to you? I repeated, my own anger rising. Curtis, you stole the card I need to access my Social Security money. You took $800 from my account, more than half my monthly income. You left me with barely enough money to survive until my next payment. How could you do that to me? I was going to pay you back, Curtis claimed. With what money? I demanded. You don't have a job. You've been lying to me for 3 weeks about still working at the warehouse. Where were you going to get $800 to pay me back? I'm looking for work, Curtis said defensively. I would have found something and paid you back eventually. Eventually doesn't help me now, I said. Curtis, I live on $1,247 a month. My rent alone is $650. You took $800. Do the math. How am I supposed to pay my rent and buy food and pay for my medicine? I don't know, Curtis shouted. But you didn't have to call the cops. We could have worked this out between us. We've been working it out between us for 30 years, I said, my voice shaking. You've been stealing from me since you were a teenager, Curtis. Every time I made excuses. Every time I believed you when you said you'd change. But you never changed. You just kept stealing. So this is revenge? Curtis asked. You're punishing me for things I did years ago. No, I said. I'm holding you accountable for stealing my pension card yesterday. But Curtis, the police told me something interesting. Did you know they ran your name through their system? Curtis was silent. They found 2 prior arrests for theft, I continued. One for shoplifting 5 years ago, one for stealing from your employer 3 years ago. You never told me about those arrests, Curtis. You've been lying to me for years. Those charges were dropped, Curtis said defensively. They were dropped because the people you stole from decided not to prosecute, I corrected. But Curtis, don't you see the pattern? You've been stealing your entire adult life. You've been arrested twice. You've been fired from jobs for theft. And you just can't stop. So yes, I called the police, because nothing else has worked. I can't believe you're doing this to me, Curtis said, and now he sounded like he was crying. Mom, I'm in jail. They're saying I might be charged with a felony. Do you know what that means? I could go to prison. I'll have a criminal record. I'll never be able to get a decent job again. You should have thought about that before you stole my pension card, I said quietly. Please, Curtis begged. Please call the police and tell them you made a mistake. Tell them you found your card. Tell them you don't want to press charges. Mom, please, I'm your son. For a moment, I wavered. This was my son, my baby, the little boy I'd raised alone after his father died, the child I'd loved more than anything in the world. But then I thought about my empty refrigerator, about the $800 Curtis had stolen, about 30 years of theft and lies, about the fact that Curtis had never, not once, actually changed his behavior despite all my second chances. No, I said. I'm not dropping the charges, Curtis. You stole from me. You need to face consequences. Fine, Curtis shouted. But when I get out of here, don't expect me to ever speak to you again. You're dead to me. He hung up. I sat holding the phone, tears streaming down my face. My son had just told me I was dead to him, but I'd made my choice, and I had to stick with it. Officer Thompson called me Thursday morning. Mrs. Foster, your son's arraignment is at 10 a.m. today. You have the right to be there if you want to. Should I go? I asked. That's up to you, Officer Thompson said. But I think you should know. The prosecutor has decided to charge your son with felony theft and financial exploitation of an elderly person. If convicted, he could face up to 5 years in prison. 5 years. Curtis could spend 5 years in prison because of what I'd done. I'll be there, I said. At 9:45 a.m., I walked into the courthouse. I'd never been to a criminal court before. The building was intimidating, cold, institutional, filled with people who looked tired and defeated. I found the courtroom where Curtis's arraignment would be held and sat in the back row. A few minutes later, they brought Curtis in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked terrible, exhausted, unshaven, scared. When Curtis saw me sitting in the courtroom, his expression changed from scared to furious. He mouthed something at me that I couldn't quite make out, but I was pretty sure it wasn't nice. The judge entered, and the arraignment began. The prosecutor, a young woman named Assistant District Attorney Minnie Roberts, read the charges. Your Honor, the defendant, Curtis Foster, is charged with 1 count of felony theft of property valued at more than $750 and 1 count of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The defendant allegedly stole his elderly mother's Social Security debit card and withdrew $800 from her account without permission. The judge looked at Curtis. Mr. Foster, how do you plead? Curtis's public defender, a tired-looking man named Attorney Porter Green, stood up. Not guilty, Your Honor. Your Honor, the people request that bail be set at $10,000, Ada Roberts said. The defendant has 2 prior arrests for theft, and we believe he's a flight risk. Your Honor, my client has strong ties to the community, Attorney Green argued. He's lived in this city his entire life. He's not a flight risk. We request that he be released on his own recognizance." The judge thought for a moment. "Bail is set at $5,000. Mr. Foster, you're to have no contact with the victim, your mother, while this case is pending. If you post bail and are released, you're to stay away from her. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Curtis said quietly. The judge banged his gavel. "Next case." Just like that, it was over. Curtis was led out of the courtroom. He turned to look at me one more time, and the hatred in his eyes made me flinch. I went home feeling emotionally exhausted. Curtis had been formally charged with felony theft. His bail was set at $5,000, which meant he'd need to pay a bail bondsman $500 to get out of jail, money I was pretty sure he didn't have. At 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was Geneva, Curtis's landlord. "Ruthie, I just wanted to let you know, I've started eviction proceedings against Curtis," Geneva said. "After what you told me about him stealing your pension card and lying about not having money for rent, I realized he's been playing me for a fool. I'm not going to let him take advantage of me anymore." "I understand," I said. "Thank you for telling me." "There's something else," Geneva said. "Curtis's apartment, when I went by there to post the eviction notice, I looked in the window. Ruthie, his apartment is full of stuff, new stuff, electronics, clothes, furniture, stuff he shouldn't be able to afford if he's unemployed and broke." My stomach turned. "You think he bought all that with stolen money?" "I don't know," Geneva admitted. "But it's suspicious. Ruthie, I think Curtis has been stealing for a long time, from a lot of people. Your pension card might not be the only thing he's taken." After I hung up with Geneva, I thought about what she'd said. Curtis's apartment full of things he shouldn't be able to afford. Where had he gotten the money for all that? Maybe from me. Maybe from the checks he'd forged on my account years ago. Maybe from selling the jewelry and watches he'd stolen from me. Maybe from stealing from his employers. How much had Curtis stolen over the years? Tens of thousands of dollars. More. And I'd enabled it all by never pressing charges, never reporting him, always giving him second chances. Well, not anymore. Friday morning, Officer Thompson called. "Mrs. Foster, I wanted to update you. Your son is still in jail. He hasn't been able to post bail." "He can't come up with $500 for the bail bondsman?" I asked. "Apparently not," Officer Thompson said. "He's been calling people trying to get them to loan him the money, but no one will help him. His landlord won't. His former employer won't. And I'm guessing you won't either." "No," I said firmly. "I won't." "So he'll remain in custody until his trial," Officer Thompson said, "which is probably a few months away. Mrs. Foster, I want you to know, the prosecutor thinks this is a strong case. With the transaction records, the timeline, and Curtis's prior arrests for theft, she's confident she can get a conviction." "What kind of sentence would he get?" I asked. "If he's convicted of both charges, probably 2 to 3 years in prison," Officer Thompson said. "Maybe more if the judge thinks he needs to send a message about stealing from elderly family members." 2 to 3 years. My son could spend 2 to 3 years in prison. I should have felt guilty, but instead I felt something unexpected. I felt free. For 30 years, I'd been Curtis's victim. I'd been the person he stole from, lied to, manipulated. I'd been afraid of him, afraid that if I didn't give him what he wanted, he'd abandon me. Afraid that if I reported him to police, I'd lose my only child. But by having Curtis arrested, I'd taken back my power. I wasn't his victim anymore. I wasn't afraid anymore. Curtis had stolen my pension card, and that night, I'd taken his freedom. And I'd do it again. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now. Smash that like button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Will Curtis learn his lesson? Should Ruthie feel guilty? Where are you watching from? 2 months after Curtis was arrested, I sat in my small apartment looking at the calendar. Curtis's trial was scheduled to begin in 1 week. For 2 months, he'd been sitting in the county jail because he couldn't make bail. For 2 months, I'd been living on what was left of my Social Security after Curtis stole $800. Those 2 months had been the hardest of my life, But they'd also been something unexpected. They'd been peaceful. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't have to worry about Curtis showing up and stealing from me. I didn't have to hide my valuables or keep my purse with me at all times. I didn't have to check my wallet every day to make sure nothing was missing. Curtis was in jail, and I was finally free. But that freedom came with a price. The week after Curtis was arrested, I received a call from Ada Minnie Roberts, the prosecutor handling Curtis's case. "Mrs. Foster, I need to talk to you about your son's case," she said. "We've been investigating Curtis's financial situation, and we've discovered some things I think you should know about." "What kind of things?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "We executed a search warrant on Curtis's apartment," Ada Roberts explained. "When we went through his belongings, we found a lot of items that appear to be stolen. Electronics, jewelry, expensive clothing, items that Curtis couldn't possibly afford on his income or lack of income. His landlord mentioned she'd seen a lot of new stuff in his apartment," I said. "It's more than just new stuff," Ada Roberts said. "Mrs. Foster, we found pawn shop receipts showing that Curtis has been pawning items regularly for the past 5 years. We also found multiple debit cards and credit cards that don't belong to him." I felt sick. "Whose cards are they?" "We're still investigating," Ada Roberts said. "But Mrs. Foster, I need to ask you, has your son had access to your financial information over the years? Bank account numbers, credit card numbers, social security number?" "Yes," I admitted. "I trusted him. When I had surgery 3 years ago, Curtis helped me pay my bills while I was recovering. He had access to all my accounts." "Did you notice any unusual activity on your accounts during that time?" Ada Roberts asked. I thought back to 3 years ago. I'd been in the hospital for a week after gallbladder surgery, then recovering at home for another 2 weeks. Curtis had offered to handle my bills, and I'd gratefully accepted. "There were some charges on my credit card that I didn't recognize," I admitted. "But Curtis said he'd used my card for groceries and other things I needed. I believed him." "How much were those charges?" Ada Roberts asked. "About $400, I said. "Curtis said he'd pay me back, but he never did. I eventually just wrote it off." "Mrs. Foster, I think your son has been stealing from you for much longer than just this one pension card incident," Ada Roberts said gently. "I think he's been systematically stealing from you, and possibly from other people, for years." "What do I do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "For now, nothing," Ada Roberts said. "We're still investigating. But Mrs. Foster, I want you to know, this case is bigger than just the pension card. If we can prove Curtis has been committing identity theft and credit card fraud, he could be facing a lot more charges, and a lot more prison time." After I hung up, I sat staring at the wall. Curtis hadn't just stolen my pension card. He'd been stealing from me for years in ways I hadn't even realized. How much money had he taken? How many times had he used my credit cards without permission? Had he opened accounts in my name? I felt like an idiot. I'd trusted my own son, and he'd been robbing me blind. 2 weeks after Curtis was arrested, I started receiving letters from him. The first one arrived on a Tuesday. "Mom, I've been sitting in this jail cell for 2 weeks thinking about everything that's happened, and I've realized something. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I took your pension card. I'm sorry I withdrew your money. I'm sorry I've been stealing from you for years. You're right about everything you said. I have a problem. I need help. But Mom, I can't get help sitting in jail. If you drop the charges, I promise I'll go to therapy. I'll get a job. I'll pay you back every penny I've stolen. I'll change, Mom. I swear I will. Please give me one more chance. Please don't let me go to prison. I'm your son. Don't you love me?" Curtis. I read the letter 3 times. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to think that maybe, finally, Curtis had learned his lesson and was ready to change. But I'd heard all of this before. I'd heard Curtis apologize and promise to change hundreds of times over the past 30 years, and nothing ever changed. I didn't respond to the letter. 3 days later, another letter arrived. This one was different. Mom, since you didn't respond to my last letter, I guess you're really going to let me rot in jail. Fine, but you should know that when I get out, and I will get out eventually, I'm never speaking to you again. You've destroyed my life. You've turned the whole family against me. You've ruined any chance I have of getting a job or building a future. All because you couldn't just forgive me for one mistake. I hope you're happy. I hope it was worth it to destroy your own son. Don't bother visiting me in prison. I don't want to see you ever again. Curtis. I read this letter once and threw it away. This was the real Curtis, the one who blamed everyone else for his problems, the one who saw himself as the victim even when he was the one who'd committed the crime. Curtis sent 3 more letters over the next few weeks. Each one alternated between begging me to drop the charges and attacking me for pressing charges in the first place. I stopped reading them after a while. 1 month after Curtis was arrested, I started hearing from other family members who'd learned what happened. My sister Opal called first. Ruthie, is it true? Did you really have Curtis arrested? Yes, I said. He stole my pension card and withdrew $800 from my account. He left me with barely enough money to survive the month. I can't believe Curtis would do that to you, Opal said, though she didn't sound entirely surprised. But Ruthie, did you have to have him arrested? Couldn't you have worked it out between you? Opal, Curtis has been stealing from me for 30 years, I said firmly. I've worked it out between yous hundreds of times. It never worked. He never changed. This time I decided he needed to face real consequences. But he's your son, Opal said. Don't you feel bad that he's sitting in jail? Do you know what I feel bad about? I asked. I feel bad that I had $22 left after Curtis stole my money. I feel bad that I had to ask my neighbor to loan me money to buy groceries. I feel bad that I'm 71 years old and my own son thinks it's okay to steal the money I need to survive. That's what I feel bad about. I'm not saying what Curtis did was right, Opal said quickly. I'm just saying, he's still your son. Maybe you could talk to the prosecutor about reducing the charges or something. No, I said. Opal, I love you, but I'm not going to reduce the charges. Curtis needs to learn that stealing has consequences. Other family members called with similar reactions. Some supported my decision. Others thought I was being too harsh. A few stopped speaking to me altogether. Curtis's ex-wife Minnie called to say she wasn't surprised. Curtis stole from me when we were married, Minnie told me. Money, jewelry, even toys from our kids. I tried to tell you back then that Curtis had a problem, but you always defended him. I'm glad you're finally holding him accountable. Curtis's childhood friend Theodore called to say that Curtis had stolen his gaming console 5 years ago and pawned it. I always suspected it was Curtis, but I didn't have proof. Now I know it was him. Ruthie, you did the right thing. Curtis is a thief, and he needed to be stopped. The more people I talked to, the more I realized. Curtis hadn't just been stealing from me. He'd been stealing from everyone in his life. And I'd been enabling it by always bailing him out and protecting him from consequences. Well, not anymore. 6 weeks after Curtis was arrested, Ada Roberts called me. Mrs. Foster, I need to talk to you about a plea deal. What kind of plea deal? I asked. Curtis's attorney has approached us about a plea agreement, Ada Roberts explained. Curtis is willing to plead guilty to the felony theft charge if we drop the financial exploitation charge. In exchange, he'd be sentenced to 2 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. What happens if we don't accept the plea deal? I asked. Then we go to trial, Ada Roberts said. If we go to trial and Curtis is convicted of both charges, he'd likely get 3 to 5 years in prison. But trials are unpredictable. There's always a chance the jury could acquit him or only convict him on the lesser charge. What do you think I should do? I asked. That's up to you, Ada Roberts said. But Mrs. Foster, I need to be honest with you. Plea deals exist because they benefit both sides. Curtis gets a reduced sentence. We get a guaranteed conviction without the time and expense of a trial, and you get closure without having to testify. I'd have to testify at trial, I asked. Yes, Ada Roberts confirmed. You'd have to take the stand and tell the jury what Curtis did. Curtis's attorney would cross-examine you. It could be very difficult emotionally. I thought about sitting in a courtroom while Curtis's lawyer tried to make me look like a confused old woman who'd misplaced her pension card. I thought about Curtis sitting there watching me, hatting me. "I'll accept the plea deal," I said. 2 years in prison, Curtis pleads guilty. "I think that's a good decision," Ada Roberts said. "I'll call Curtis's attorney and finalize the agreement. The plea hearing will be in about 2 weeks." 2 weeks later, I sat in the same courtroom where Curtis's arraignment had been held. This time, Curtis would be pleading guilty. They brought Curtis in wearing his orange jumpsuit. He'd lost weight during his 2 months in jail. He looked older, harder, angrier. The judge, Judge Raymond Foster, reviewed the plea agreement. "Mr. Curtis Foster, you're pleading guilty to 1 count of felony theft of property valued at more than $750. In exchange for your guilty plea, the charge of financial exploitation of an elderly person will be dismissed. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Curtis said quietly. "Mr. Foster, by pleading guilty, you're admitting that you stole your mother's Social Security pension card and withdrew $800 from her account without her permission. Is that what happened?" the judge asked. Curtis glanced at me sitting in the back row. For a moment, I thought he might refuse to plead guilty. But then he said, "Yes, Your Honor, that's what happened. And you understand that by pleading guilty, you'll be sentenced to 2 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. Judge Foster continued. "Yes, Your Honor," Curtis said. "Very well," the judge said. "I accept your guilty plea. Mr. Foster, you're hereby sentenced to 2 years in state prison. You'll be transferred to the state correctional facility within the next week. Do you have anything to say before you're remanded into custody?" Curtis turned and looked directly at me. "I have something to say to my mother." "Go ahead," the judge said. "Mom, I hope you're happy," Curtis said, his voice bitter. "I hope putting your own son in prison was worth it. I hope you can live with yourself knowing you destroyed my life over $800, because I'll never forgive you for this. Never." The courtroom was silent. Everyone was looking at me, waiting to see how I'd react. I stood up. "Curtis, you destroyed your own life. You stole from me. You stole from your employer. You stole from your friends. You've been stealing for 30 years, and I've been protecting you for 30 years. All that did was make you worse. So yes, I can live with myself. Because for the first time in 30 years, I chose to protect myself instead of protecting you." Curtis's face twisted with anger, but before he could respond, the bailiff led him out of the courtroom. Judge Foster looked at me. "Mrs. Foster, I want you to know that you did the right thing. Too many elderly victims of financial abuse don't report the crimes committed against them because they feel guilty about getting their family members in trouble. But you had the courage to hold your son accountable. I hope other victims will follow your example." I nodded, too emotional to speak. Curtis was going to prison for 2 years because of me. 2 months after Curtis was arrested, I was still living alone in my apartment. Curtis had been transferred to a state prison about 3 hours away. I hadn't visited him. He'd made it clear he didn't want to see me, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to see him either. Life was different without Curtis. It was quieter, lonelier, but also safer. I didn't have to worry about Curtis showing up and stealing from me. I didn't have to hide my valuables or keep my purse with me at all times. I didn't have to wonder if the son who visited me loved me or just loved what he could steal from me. My Social Security had finally refunded the $800 Curtis stole. It took 6 weeks, but the money was back in my account. I'd been able to pay my rent on time, buy groceries, refill my medications. I was surviving, but I was also grieving. I'd lost my son, not because he'd died, but because I'd finally admitted something I'd been denying for 30 years. Curtis wasn't the son I wanted him to be. He wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to suddenly become honest and responsible and loving. Curtis was a thief. That's who he was. That's who he'd always been, and I'd finally stopped making excuses for him. One afternoon, My friend Opal from Curtis's old apartment building came to visit me. "How are you doing, Ruthie?" she asked gently. "I'm okay," I said. "Some days are harder than others, but I'm okay." "Do you regret having Curtis arrested?" Opal asked. I thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. What I regret is that it took me 30 years to do it. I regret all the times I made excuses for him. I regret all the times I gave him another chance. I regret enabling him for so long that stealing became a way of life for him." "You were being a mother," Opal said. "You loved your son, that's not something to regret." "But there's a difference between loving someone and enabling them," I said. "I thought I was helping Curtis by always forgiving him and giving him second chances. But all I was doing was teaching him that he could steal without consequences. I should have held him accountable the first time he stole from me. Maybe then he would have learned to stop." "Maybe," Opal said. "Or maybe Curtis would have kept stealing anyway. Ruthie, you can't blame yourself for Curtis's choices. He's an adult. He chose to steal. He chose to lie. He chose to keep stealing even after he'd been arrested twice before. Those were his choices, not yours." "I know," I said, "but it's hard not to wonder what I could have done differently." 10 weeks after Curtis was arrested, I received a collect call from the state prison. "This is a collect call from an inmate at State Correctional Facility," the automated voice said. "To accept charges, press 1. I hesitated. I hadn't spoken to Curtis since the plea hearing. Did I want to talk to him now? Finally, I pressed 1. "Mom," Curtis's voice came through. He sounded different, less angry, more tired. "Hello, Curtis," I said cautiously. I wanted to call and tell you something," Curtis said. "I've been in here for 2 months now, and I've had a lot of time to think." "Okay," I said, not sure where this was going. "Mom, I'm sorry," Curtis said. "I'm sorry I stole your pension card. I'm sorry I took your money. I'm sorry I've been stealing from you for years. You were right about everything you said at the plea hearing. I destroyed my own life. You didn't destroy it. I did." I felt tears forming. This was what I'd wanted to hear for 30 years, a genuine apology from Curtis. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "I know it doesn't fix anything," Curtis continued. "And I know you probably don't believe me. I've apologized a million times before and never changed. But Mom, being in prison, it's different from being in jail. Jail was just a holding cell. Prison is where I'm going to be for the next 2 years. And I've realized I don't want to come back here. I don't want to be a thief anymore." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I've signed up for some classes," Curtis said. "They have education programs here. I'm going to get my GED. I never finished high school, you know that. And then I'm going to take some vocational training classes. Maybe learn a trade. Something so that when I get out, I can get a real job and support myself without stealing." "That's good, Curtis," I said. "I'm glad you're trying to make positive changes." "Mom, I know I said some terrible things to you," Curtis said. "I told you I'd never speak to you again. I told you I'd never forgive you. But I was wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You held me accountable for my actions. That's what a good mother is supposed to do. And I'm sorry it took me being in prison to realize that." "Curtis, I need you to understand something," I said. "I love you. You're my son, and I'll always love you. But I can't have you in my life if you're going to keep stealing from me. I can't live like that anymore." "I understand," Curtis said. "And Mom, I don't expect you to just forgive me and trust me again. I know I have to earn that. It's going to take time, maybe years, but I'm going to try. I'm going to be better, I promise." "I hope you mean that," I said. "Because Curtis, this is your last chance. If you steal from me again after you get out of prison, I'm done. I won't press charges again, you'll just be dead to me. Do you understand?" "I understand," Curtis said. "And Mom, thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For finally holding me accountable," Curtis said. "For finally making me face consequences. I needed this. I didn't know it at the time, but I needed to hit rock bottom to realize I had to change. So thank you." After I hung up, I sat holding the phone and crying. I didn't know if Curtis was telling the truth. I didn't know if he'd really change this time. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But for the first time in 30 years, I felt hope. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now. Smash that like button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Will Curtis really change? Should Ruthie give him another chance? Where are you watching from? 18 months after Curtis went to prison, I received a phone call from the parole board. Curtis was eligible for parole and had requested a hearing. They wanted to know if I, as the victim of his crime, wanted to attend the hearing and give a victim impact statement. I thought about it for a long time. Did I want to see Curtis after 18 months? Did I want to tell a room full of strangers how his theft had affected me? But more importantly, did I want Curtis to be released? Over the past 18 months, Curtis had called me once a month from prison. Each time, he told me about the classes he was taking, the progress he was making, the ways he was trying to change. He'd earned his GED. He'd completed a vocational training program in HVAC repair. He'd been attending therapy groups for people with addiction and impulse control issues. Curtis said all the right things, but I'd heard Curtis say all the right things before. The difference this time was that I didn't need Curtis to change for me. I'd spent 18 months building a life that didn't revolve around worrying about my son. I'd joined a senior center where I'd made friends. I'd started volunteering at a food bank. I'd even started dating someone, a nice man named Porter who treated me with respect and kindness. I was happy. For the first time in 30 years, I was genuinely happy. So when the parole board asked if I wanted to attend Curtis's hearing, I said yes. Not because I wanted to stop him from being released, but because I wanted to make one thing perfectly clear. If Curtis got out and stole from me again, I would not give him another chance. The parole hearing was held at the state prison. I arrived early and sat in a small waiting room until they called me in. When I entered the hearing room, Curtis was already there, sitting at a table with his prison-appointed advocate. He was wearing prison blues, a blue shirt and blue pants. He'd gained back the weight he'd lost in jail and then some. He looked healthy, clean, different somehow. When Curtis saw me, he smiled nervously. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Curtis," I said, sitting down in the chair designated for me. The parole board consisted of 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, all in their 50s or 60s. The chairperson, a woman named Commissioner Geneva Harris, looked at me with kind eyes. "Mrs. Foster, thank you for coming today," Commissioner Harris said. "We know this must be difficult for you. Before we hear from Curtis, we'd like to give you an opportunity to address the board. You can tell us how Curtis's crime affected you and whether you support or oppose his release on parole." I took a deep breath and looked at the 3 commissioners. Then I looked at Curtis, who was watching me nervously. 18 months ago, my son Curtis stole my Social Security pension card and withdrew $800 from my account, I began. That money was all I had to live on for the month. Because of what Curtis did, I had $22 left after he stole from me. I couldn't afford groceries. I couldn't afford my medications. I had to ask my neighbors for help, which was humiliating for a woman my age who's always prided herself on being independent. Curtis looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. "But the $800 wasn't the worst part," I continued. "The worst part was realizing that my own son, the child I raised alone after his father died, the child I worked 2 jobs to support, the child I sacrificed everything for, valued my money more than he valued me. The worst part was realizing that Curtis had been stealing from me for 30 years, and I'd been enabling him by always forgiving him and giving him second chances." Commissioner Harris nodded. "How did Curtis's theft and subsequent imprisonment affect your life?" "In the beginning, it was devastating," I admitted. "I felt guilty for having my own son arrested. I felt like a failure as a mother. I wondered if there was something I could have done differently to prevent Curtis from becoming a thief." "And now," Commissioner Harris asked, "how do you feel now?" "Now," I said, thinking about it, "now I realize that I didn't fail Curtis. Curtis failed himself. I gave him every opportunity to change. I gave him second chances for 30 years, but Curtis chose to keep stealing. Those were his choices, not mine." "Do you support Curtis's release on parole?" Commissioner Harris asked. I looked at Curtis. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hope mixed with fear, mixed with something that might have been genuine remorse. Yes, I said. I support his release. Curtis's face lit up with surprise and relief. But, I continued, and Curtis's smile faded, I want to make something very clear. If Curtis is released and steals from me again, if he steals from anyone again, I will not protect him. I will not make excuses for him. I will not give him another chance. This is his last chance. If he wastes it, he's on his own. Thank you, Mrs. Foster, Commissioner Harris said. Curtis, would you like to respond to what your mother has said? Curtis stood up. Mom, I know I've apologized before and never followed through. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I want you to know, I'm not the same person who stole your pension card 18 months ago. Being in prison changed me, Curtis continued. It made me realize that I can't keep living the way I was living. I can't keep stealing. I can't keep lying. I can't keep blaming everyone else for my problems. If I keep doing that, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in and out of prison, and I don't want that. I've been taking classes, Curtis said. I got my GED. I learned a trade. I've been in therapy learning about why I steal and how to control those impulses. When I get out, if I get out, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to support myself honestly. I'm going to prove to you that I've changed. I don't expect you to trust me right away, Curtis said, looking directly at me. I know I have to earn your trust back. It might take years, but Mom, I'm going to do it. I promise you, I'm not going to let you down again. The commissioners asked Curtis some questions about his plans for housing, employment, and ongoing therapy if he was released. Curtis had answers for everything. He'd lined up a job interview with an HVAC company. He'd been accepted into a halfway house for parolees. He'd committed to continuing therapy. After 30 minutes, the hearing was over. The commissioners said they'd deliberate and notify Curtis of their decision within a week. As I was leaving, Curtis called out, Mom, thank you. Thank you for supporting my release. I know I don't deserve it. I stopped and turned to look at him. You're right, you don't deserve it. But Curtis, everyone deserves a chance to change. This is your chance. Don't waste it. 1 week after the parole hearing, I received a call from Curtis. Mom, they approved my parole. I'm getting out next week. Congratulations, I said, and I meant it. I'm happy for you, Curtis. Mom, I was wondering, Curtis said hesitantly. When I get out, could I come see you? I'd like to talk to you in person. I thought about it. Having Curtis in my apartment again, the place where he'd stolen my pension card 18 months ago, felt risky. But I also knew that if Curtis and I were going to rebuild any kind of relationship, we had to start somewhere. Okay, I said. But Curtis, when you come to my apartment, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to have cash lying around for you to take. I'm not going to leave my purse unattended. I'm going to be watching you. Because even though I want to believe you've changed, I need to protect myself. I understand, Curtis said quietly. And Mom, that's smart. You should protect yourself. I've given you every reason not to trust me. I have to prove I'm trustworthy now. 2 weeks later, Curtis was released from prison. He went to the halfway house where he'd be living for the next 6 months, got settled in, and then called to ask if he could visit me. Come over Saturday afternoon, I told him, around 2 o'clock. Saturday at 2 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Curtis standing there in civilian clothes, jeans, and a plain blue t-shirt. He looked nervous. I opened the door. Hello, Curtis. Hi, Mom, Curtis said. He held up his hands. I come in peace, no stealing, I promise. I couldn't help but smile a little. Come in. Curtis came into my apartment and looked around. It looks different, he said. I rearranged some things, I said. I didn't mention that I'd rearranged things specifically so that my purse was never in the same place Curtis remembered it being. We sat down at my kitchen table. There was an awkward silence. So, Curtis finally said, I got the job at the HVAC company. I start on Monday. That's wonderful, I said. I'm proud of you for getting a job so quickly. I want to pay you back, Curtis said. The $800 I stole, plus all the other money I took from you over the years. I know it's going to take a while, but I want to make it right." "Curtis, I appreciate that," I said. "But what I need from you more than money is honesty. If you're struggling, I need you to tell me. If you're tempted to steal, I need you to tell me. If you're not doing well, I need you to tell me. Because the lying is what hurt me more than the stealing." "I can do that," Curtis said. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about this a lot in prison, and I think I finally understand why I kept stealing from you." "Why?" I asked. "Because it was easy," Curtis said. "You always forgave me. You always gave me another chance. And I took advantage of that. I knew that no matter what I did, you'd still love me and still help me. So I never had to change. I never had to take responsibility for my actions because you were always there to bail me out. But when you finally held me accountable, when you had me arrested and refused to drop the charges, it was the first time in my life I couldn't talk my way out of consequences," Curtis continued. "And it was the first time I realized, if I don't change, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose my freedom. I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose you." "And losing you scared me more than anything," Curtis said, his voice breaking. "Mom, I know I said terrible things to you. I know I told you I'd never forgive you for having me arrested. But the truth is, you did the right thing. You did what no one else would do. You held me accountable even though it hurt you. And that's what finally made me realize I had to change." I felt tears forming. "Curtis, I love you. I've always loved you. But love doesn't mean protecting someone from the consequences of their actions. Real love means letting them face consequences so they can learn and grow." "I know that now," Curtis said. "And Mom, I want you to know, I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to show you that your tough love worked. I'm going to show you that I can be the son you always hoped I'd be." 6 months after Curtis was released from prison, I received a phone call from him. "Mom, I have something to show you. Can I come over?" "Of course," I said. When Curtis arrived, he was smiling. "Look at this," he said, pulling out his phone and showing me his bank account balance. It showed $3,200. "I've been saving," Curtis said proudly. "I've been working full-time at the HVAC company, and I've been saving every penny I can. And Mom, I want to give you this." He pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. Inside was $800 in cash. "This is the money I stole from you," Curtis said. "I know it took me 6 months to save it up, but I wanted to pay you back in full. And Mom, this is just the beginning. I'm going to keep saving, and I'm going to pay you back for all the other money I stole over the years. It might take years, but I'm going to do it." I looked at the cash in my hands. 18 months ago, Curtis had stolen $800 from me and spent it on beer and cigarettes. Now he was handing me $800 that he'd earned through honest work. "Curtis, I'm proud of you," I said, and I meant it. "I'm proud of the changes you've made." "I couldn't have done it without you," Curtis said. "If you hadn't held me accountable, I'd still be stealing. I'd probably be back in prison by now. So thank you, Mom. Thank you for loving me enough to let me fail. Thank you for loving me enough to let me face consequences." Over the next 6 months, Curtis continued to make progress. He got a promotion at work. He moved out of the halfway house and into his own apartment, a small studio that he could afford on his own. He started attending a support group for people with theft and impulse control issues. He continued therapy. And most importantly, he stayed honest. When he was tempted to steal, and he admitted there were times when he was tempted, he called me or his therapist instead of acting on the impulse. 1 year after Curtis was released from prison, we celebrated his progress with a small dinner at my apartment. Curtis brought his girlfriend, a nice woman named Minnie who worked as a teacher and didn't know about Curtis's criminal past yet, but Curtis said he planned to tell her soon. "I've learned that honesty is the most important thing in a relationship," Curtis told me. "If Minnie and I are going to have a future together, she needs to know about my past. And if she can't accept it, then she's not the right person for me." I was impressed by Curtis's maturity. This was not the same man who'd stolen my pension card 2 years ago. This was someone different, someone who took responsibility for his actions, someone who was honest about his struggles, someone who was working hard to be better. After dinner, Curtis asked if he could talk to me alone. Minnie went into the living room while Curtis and I stayed in the kitchen. "Mom, I need to tell you something," Curtis said. "I've been thinking about this a lot and I think I'm ready." "Ready for what?" I asked. "Ready to forgive myself," Curtis said. "I've spent the past 2 years feeling guilty about everything I did to you, and I think I needed to feel that guilt. I needed to understand how much I hurt you. But my therapist says that at some point, I need to forgive myself so I can move forward." "I think that's healthy," I said. "You've worked hard to change, Curtis. You've earned the right to forgive yourself." "But I need to know something first," Curtis said. "Mom, do you forgive me?" I thought about it. Did I forgive Curtis? After 30 years of theft and lies, after being stolen from, manipulated, gaslit, after having to have my own son arrested to make him face consequences. "Yes," I said finally. "I forgive you, Curtis, not because what you did was okay, it wasn't, but because you've shown me through your actions over the past 2 years that you're genuinely trying to change. You've done the work, you've faced consequences, you've made amends, and most importantly, you've stayed honest with me, so yes. I forgive you." Curtis started crying. "Thank you, Mom. You don't know how much that means to me." "But Curtis," I added, "forgiveness doesn't mean I've forgotten what happened. And it doesn't mean I'm going to go back to the way things were before. If you steal from me again, we're done. Do you understand?" "I understand," Curtis said. "And Mom, I promise you, I'm never going to steal from you again. I'm never going to steal from anyone again. I've learned my lesson." 2 years after Curtis was released from prison, I sat in my apartment reflecting on everything that had happened. Curtis was thriving. He'd been promoted to supervisor at the HVAC company. He was engaged to Minnie, who'd accepted his past and supported his recovery. He'd paid me back the $800 he stole, plus an additional $2,000 to cover other money he'd taken over the years. He was still in therapy and still attending his support group. Most importantly, Curtis hadn't stolen anything in 2 years. Not from me, not from his employer, not from anyone. My son had changed, really, truly changed. And I had changed too. I was no longer the woman who enabled her son's bad behavior out of fear of losing him. I was no longer willing to sacrifice my own well-being to protect someone who was hurting me. I'd learned that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to hold them accountable for their actions. Sometimes, letting someone face consequences is the only way they'll learn to change. Curtis stole my pension card, and that night, I took his freedom by having him arrested and sent to prison. But in taking his freedom, I'd given him something more valuable. I'd given him the chance to change. I'd given him the opportunity to hit rock bottom and rebuild himself into someone better. And in the process, I'd taken back my own freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from enabling, freedom from being a victim. I'm now 73 years old, 2 years after my son Curtis stole my pension card, and 2 years after I had him arrested. Here's what I've learned. Lesson 1, enabling is not love. For 30 years, I thought I was helping Curtis by always forgiving him and giving him second chances. But all I was doing was teaching him that he could steal without facing consequences. Real love means holding people accountable, even when it's hard. Lesson 2, you can't change people who don't want to change. I spent 30 years hoping Curtis would change on his own. But people only change when they're forced to face the consequences of their actions. Until Curtis was arrested and sent to prison, he had no motivation to change. Lesson 3, it's never too late to set boundaries. I was 71 years old when I finally set boundaries with Curtis. Some people might think that's too late, that after 30 years of enabling, the relationship was too damaged to fix. But it's never too late to start protecting yourself. Lesson 4, sometimes the toughest decision is the right decision. Having my own son arrested was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the right thing. Because if I hadn't held Curtis accountable, he'd still be stealing today. He'd probably be in prison anyway, but without having learned anything. Lesson 5, you can't help someone who won't help themselves. For 30 years, I tried to help Curtis by giving him money, making excuses for him, and protecting him from consequences. But none of that helped. The only thing that helped was forcing Curtis to face consequences and do the hard work of changing himself. Curtis and I have a relationship now, but it's different from the relationship we had before. We're not as close as we were when Curtis was stealing from me and I was enabling him. But our relationship now is healthier because it's based on honesty and mutual respect instead of manipulation and codependency. Curtis visits me once a week for dinner. We talk about his job, his upcoming wedding, his plans for the future. He brings me flowers sometimes. He helps me with repairs around my apartment. He acts like a son should act. And I've learned to enjoy his company without constantly worrying that he's going to steal from me. I don't hide my purse when he's over. I don't count my money after he leaves. I don't check my credit card statements obsessively. Because Curtis has proven through 2 years of consistent behavior that he's changed. But I'm also realistic. I know that addiction and impulse control issues are lifelong struggles. I know that Curtis will have to work every day for the rest of his life to resist the temptation to steal. And I know that if Curtis ever steals again, I'll have to hold him accountable again, even if it means losing him forever. But I also know something else. By having Curtis arrested, I didn't destroy our relationship. I saved it. Because the relationship we have now, built on honesty, respect, and healthy boundaries, is better than the relationship we had before, which was built on lies, manipulation, and fear. If you're reading this story because you're dealing with a family member who steals from you, lies to you, or takes advantage of you, I want you to know something. You are not alone. Millions of elderly people are victimized by their own family members every year, and most of them don't report it because they feel guilty, ashamed, or afraid of losing their family. You are not responsible for their behavior. Your family member made the choice to steal from you. That's on them, not you. Enabling is not helping. If you keep bailing out your family member, making excuses for them, and protecting them from consequences, you're not helping them. You're making it easier for them to keep behaving badly. Setting boundaries is not cruel. Holding someone accountable for stealing from you is not mean or heartless. It's the only way they'll learn to change. It's never too late. I was 71 years old when I finally held Curtis accountable. Some people might think that's too late, but Curtis changed. And if Curtis can change after 30 years of stealing, anyone can change. My son stole my pension card. That night, I took his freedom. And 2 years later, we both ended up more free than we'd ever been. Because sometimes, the only way to save someone is to let them fall. And sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to stop catching them. This story proves that holding family accountable is an act of love. Enabling prolongs bad behavior. Prison can be catalyst for real change. It's never too late to set boundaries. Tough love saves relationships. Consequences teach responsibility. Victims can reclaim their power. Change is possible at any age. If this story moved you, subscribe for more powerful justice stories. Smash that like button. Turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Did Curtis deserve a second chance? Would you have arrested your own child? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, South Africa, Australia, Trinidad, Philippines. Remember, if family steals from you, report it. Enabling isn't helping. Setting boundaries protects everyone. Real love includes consequences. You deserve safety from family theft. Don't let guilt stop you from self-protection. Change requires accountability. Prison can save lives. Tough choices lead to healing. Your well-being matters. Thank you for following Ruthie and Curtis's journey from theft to prison, to redemption to freedom.